Somewhere right now, in a climate-controlled garage or a neglected storage unit, an engine that will never be built again is sitting quietly, and the person who owns it has no idea what they're really holding. For over a decade, 10-cylinder engines powered some of the most obsessive, uncompromising machines the automotive world has ever produced. No turbos hiding the sound. No hybrid battery softening the character. Just 10 cylinders, screaming to 8 or 9,000 RPM, built by engineers who were told to stop holding back. Then the rules changed. Emissions targets tightened. Electrification took over. One by one, every manufacturer that ever built a V10 quietly walked away from it, and they are never coming back. That means every V10 ever made is now a fixed number. No more will be built. Ever. Most owners don't understand what that means yet. Some are still driving these cars like ordinary sports cars. Some already sold theirs for pennies compared to what they're about to be worth. Today we're counting down 7 of the last great V10s, the engineering, the history, and the hidden reasons collectors believe these engines are about to become some of the most valuable in the world. The BMW M5 wasn't supposed to make anyone rich. For years, it did the opposite. It scared people off completely. Historical records show BMW built exactly one V10 in its entire road car history. And when the S85 engine landed in the E60 M5 back in 2005, the reaction from the used market wasn't excitement. It was fear. Owners started whispering about rod-bearing wear. Independent mechanics warned buyers away. Insurance costs climbed. Within a few years, these cars that once carried 6-figure price tags were being dumped for the price of a used Honda, sometimes less. Dealers couldn't move them fast enough. Nobody wanted the risk. But here's what most buyers back then completely missed. This wasn't some watered-down performance engine borrowed from a sedan lineup. BMW engineers built the S85 using knowledge pulled directly from their Formula One program, the same DNA that powered the P84 engine competing on Grand Prix grids. It revved to 8,250 revolutions per minute. It used individual throttle bodies for each cylinder. It made a sound that no BMW before or since has ever replicated, and once BMW walked away from it, the door closed permanently. No successor, no V10 replacement. Ever. That's the part collectors figured out years later, after the fear had already done its damage. Somewhere out there is a former M5 owner who sold their car in 2013 for less than $15,000, terrified of a rod-bearing failure that never happened to them personally. They watched from the sidelines as well documented. Rebuilt examples started climbing back into serious money, bought by people who understood exactly what they were getting. A hand-built F1 derived V10 that BMW will never build again, at a price that reflected panic instead of history. The owners who kept their M5s, who paid for the proper rebuild and kept the paperwork, are not selling anymore. They know what they're sitting on. That's the story with a screaming BMW V10 built by Formula One engineers. But the next car on this list gave up something even rarer than an engine. It handed drivers a gated manual gearbox bolted to a V10, a combination that barely existed anywhere else. And the moment it disappeared, everything about how collectors valued it changed. When Audi launched the R8 V10 in 2009, the automotive press called it the supercar you could drive every single day. That description was meant as a compliment. It ended up creating a problem nobody saw coming. Because a supercar that's comfortable enough for daily use gets used daily. Owners drove their R8s to work, to dinner, on road trips, the way you drive any well-built German car. Nobody treated it like a garage queen. Nobody assumed it needed protecting. For years, that made the R8 V10 one of the most common sights in any city with money. Just another fast car in traffic. What changed everything wasn't the engine. It was the gearbox sitting behind it. Audi offered the R8 V10 with a genuine gated manual transmission, the kind with a metal shift gate you could hear and feel with every gear change. The same style of gearbox Lamborghini made famous. It's the same naturally aspirated 5.2-liter V10 later shared with the Gallardo, tuned by Audi to deliver its own personality, paired with a shifter that required actual skill to use well. Then automakers everywhere abandoned manual transmissions almost overnight. Dual-clutch systems took over because they shifted faster and tested better on paper. Audi followed the same path. The gated manual R8 quietly disappeared from order sheets. and almost nobody at the time understood what had just been discontinued. Collectors are the ones who noticed first. They started tracking exactly how many manual R8 V10s Audi actually built, and the number was small enough to shock people who assumed these cars were everywhere. A naturally aspirated V10 supercar, paired with a true manual gearbox, from a manufacturer that will never build that combination again. That's not a used sports car anymore. That's a documented, disappearing configuration. Right now, well-kept manual R8 V10s are quietly outpacing their automated dual-clutch siblings at auction, and the gap keeps widening every year. Germany gave up its manual V10 supercar without much resistance. But across the ocean, one American manufacturer refused to let its V10 go quietly. And when the factory finally did shut its doors for good, it didn't happen with a whisper. It happened with a headline. In 2017, Dodge did something almost no car company ever does voluntarily. They shut down the factory that built their most extreme car, permanently, while demand for it was still climbing. The final generation Viper, especially the ACR variant, wasn't built to be comfortable or quiet or easy to live with. It was built to be the angriest, most track-focused version of a car that never apologized for anything. Under that impossibly long hood sat an 8.4-liter V10, naturally aspirated, producing 645 horsepower with a personality that felt almost hostile compared to the increasingly digital, filtered supercars being released around it. The ACR variant took that formula and pushed it further. Dodge stripped weight, added the largest wing ever fitted to a production car at the time, and let it set lap records at tracks across the country. This wasn't a car built by committee. It was built by engineers who were told, one final time, to stop compromising. Then Fiat Chrysler made the call. Emissions regulations were tightening. The Viper's aging platform couldn't be updated cost-effectively to comply. Rather than water down the car into something safer and softer, the company chose to end it completely. The last Viper rolled off the line in August 2017, and with it, the last American-built V10 production car disappeared from the market entirely. Here's where the regret sets in. Some ACR owners, spooked by insurance costs and the car's brutal reputation, sold within a year or two of buying, convinced something more practical made sense. They watched from a distance as remaining ACRs, especially low-mileage, documented examples, started climbing well past their original window sticker prices. Dodge will never build another naturally aspirated V10 production car. That's not speculation. That's a company that shut its own factory down rather than compromise the formula. So here's a question worth sitting with. If you own the last uncompromising American V10 ever built, would you have sold it? Or would you have parked it and waited? America gave up its V10 in a blaze of defiance. But halfway across the world, an Italian manufacturer had already turned scarcity itself into a marketing strategy, and one particular edition of their V10 supercar became so limited that finding one today feels like finding a fingerprint. Lamborghini almost ruined the Gallardo's reputation before collectors ever got the chance to save it. When it launched in 2003, purists were furious. This was the entry-level Lamborghini, the one built to be more usable, more reliable, more everyday than anything the brand had ever produced. Enthusiasts called it a Lamborghini for people who couldn't handle a real Lamborghini. For years, that stigma followed the Gallardo everywhere, even as it quietly became the best-selling model in the company's history. Then Lamborghini made two decisions that changed the entire trajectory of this car's value. The first was the Superleggera, a stripped-down, weight-obsessed version of the Gallardo built with carbon fiber panels and a bare-bones interior, chasing pure performance instead of comfort. The second was the Balboni edition, named after Lamborghini's legendary test driver Valentino Balboni, built exclusively with rear-wheel drive and a gated manual gearbox at a time when the company was moving everything toward all-wheel drive, paddle-shift technology. Lamborghini built only 250 Balboni editions worldwide, each one individually numbered, each one representing a version of the Gallardo formula that would never be repeated. Auction results reveal what happened next. As Lamborghini phased out both the manual gearbox and the naturally aspirated V10 entirely, values for Superleggera and Balboni examples didn't just hold steady. They started climbing sharply, outperforming standard Gallardos by a significant margin. The same car that enthusiasts once dismissed as the budget Lamborghini is now recognized as one of the last analog Lamborghinis ever built, powered by a version of the same 5.2-liter V10 shared with Audi's R8. Some early Gallardo owners sold during the 2010s, when values sat flat and the car still carried its entry-level reputation. They walked away from what collectors now consider one of the most historically significant Lamborghinis of the modern era. That's what happens when a manufacturer accidentally builds a future icon while trying to build an accessible one. But accessible was never the goal for the next car on this list. This one came from Japan, took 4 years longer to build than planned, and was engineered with an obsession that makes even Lamborghini's approach look restrained. Lexus spent a decade building a car most people assumed would never actually happen. When rumors of the LFA first surfaced, journalists treated it as a joke. Lexus, the brand known for comfortable sedans and reliability awards, building a hand-assembled supercar to rival Ferrari? Nobody took it seriously until prototypes started appearing at the Nürburgring, lapping the track with a sound unlike anything else on the road. What most people still don't know is how deep that obsession actually went. Lexus engineers discovered early on that a traditional metal chassis couldn't achieve the rigidity and weight targets they needed, so they made an almost irrational decision. They built an entire in-house carbon fiber weaving facility just to produce the LFA's chassis, a process so specialized that Lexus developed proprietary looms because nothing on the market could do what they needed. Production originally targeted 2005. The car didn't actually launch until 2010, 5 years late, because engineers refused to compromise on the process. Then there's the sound. Lexus didn't want a V10 that simply sounded loud. They partnered with Yamaha's instrument division, the same engineers who tune pianos and brass instruments, to design the intake and exhaust acoustics specifically so the engine's harmonics would build in intensity as RPM climbed. The 4.8-liter V10 revved so fast that Lexus had to install a digital tachometer because a traditional analog needle physically couldn't keep pace with how quickly the engine climbed to its 9,000 revolutions per minute redline. Lexus built exactly 500 LFAs, every single one sold at a loss. The company never intended the LFA to be profitable. It existed purely to prove Lexus could build something with soul, and once that statement was made, production ended permanently. Which one of these 7 would you actually choose to own, if you could only pick one? That question tends to split collectors right down the middle. Even the LFA's brutal scarcity gets overshadowed by what comes later on this list, because the next V10 wasn't just limited. It was the final naturally aspirated version of an entire bloodline, and its ending marked the close of an era Lamborghini will never reopen. The Huracan wasn't supposed to be an ending. For most of its life, it was simply the modern, more usable successor to the Gallardo, the V10 Lamborghini that finally caught up to Ferrari and McLaren in terms of technology and daily usability. Then the industry shifted underneath it, and everything about how people saw this car changed almost overnight. Lamborghini committed publicly to electrification. Hybrid powertrains, turbocharging, and eventually full electric models became the company's stated future. The Huracan, powered by a naturally aspirated 5.2-liter V10 shared in spirit with the Gallardo before it, was quietly positioned as the last of its kind, the final Lamborghini you could buy that made power the old way, with no turbos and no electric motors filling in the gaps. What most buyers didn't immediately grasp was how significant that made the car's timeline. Every Huracan variant, from the base coupe to the track-focused STO to the final Sterrato off-road edition, represents a naturally aspirated V10 platform that will never be replaced by another naturally aspirated V10. Lamborghini confirmed it directly. The replacement model moves to a hybrid, twin-turbo V8 setup entirely. There is no next-generation Huracan with this engine. There's only this one, and then something fundamentally different. That announcement changed buyer behavior almost immediately. Dealers reported waiting lists lengthening for final edition Huracans, particularly manual-adjacent, track-focused variants, as buyers who once cross-shopped hybrid alternatives suddenly wanted the naturally aspirated version specifically because it was ending. Some owners who traded in early Huracans for newer turbocharged Lamborghinis found themselves searching used listings within a year trying to buy back into the exact naturally aspirated formula they'd walked away from. This is the last naturally aspirated V10 Lamborghini we'll ever build. Not the last supercar. Not the last flagship. The last of an entire engine philosophy the company spent 2 decades perfecting. Lamborghini closed that chapter deliberately, on their own terms. But the final car on this list didn't get that luxury. Porsche built something so extreme, so uncompromising, that the car itself decided when the story would end, and the ending it wrote became one of the most talked about moments in modern automotive history. The Carrera GT wasn't built to be forgiving. It was built to be the most honest supercar Porsche had ever put on the road, with almost nothing standing between the driver and a catastrophic mistake. This was a car born from a program Porsche never even intended to sell. Engineers originally developed this naturally aspirated 5.7-liter V10 for a Le Mans prototype, and, separately, an aborted Formula One project that never made it to the grid. When both programs were shelved, Porsche had a race-bred V10 sitting and used, and rather than waste it, they built a road car around it. That decision alone tells you this engine was never designed with comfort in mind. It was designed to win. What most buyers discovered too late was the clutch. Porsche fitted the Carrera GT with a ceramic composite clutch, chosen because it could handle the engine's brutal power delivery without the weight of a conventional setup. The trade-off was a notoriously narrow, unforgiving engagement window that punished anyone who wasn't precise. Combined with minimal electronic intervention and a manual gearbox demanding real skill, this became widely regarded as the most difficult Porsche ever sold to the public, a car that rewarded expertise and exposed inexperience immediately. Then, in 2006, Porsche made a decision that sealed its scarcity forever. During unrelated testing on another model, engineers discovered a fatigue issue in a suspension component shared with the Carrera GT. With only a limited number of production slots remaining on the run, Porsche made the call to end production early rather than retrofit the fix, closing out the model at exactly 1,270 units worldwide, a number that will never grow. For years afterward, values sat surprisingly flat, held back by the car's reputation as something almost too dangerous to own. Then serious collectors began recognizing what that reputation actually represented: an unfiltered, race-derived V10 experience Porsche will never attempt again. Auction results reveal Carrera GT prices climbing well past $1.5 million for pristine examples, with bidding wars breaking out whenever a documented, low-mileage car crosses the block at Monterey or Amelia Island. Some early owners sold in the 2010s, spooked by insurance costs and horror stories. Watching current auction results, that decision now looks like one of the most expensive mistakes in modern collector history. 7 cars, 7 manufacturers, 1 identical ending. Every single V10 on this list shares the same unavoidable truth. BMW built one and never built another. Audi walked away from the manual gearbox that made theirs special. Dodge shut its own factory down rather than compromise. Lamborghini turned an entry-level model into an icon, then closed the naturally aspirated chapter for good. Lexus lost money on every single unit just to prove a point. And Porsche's V10 story ended not by choice, but by circumstance, freezing its scarcity at exactly 1,270 cars forever. None of these engines are coming back. Not because manufacturers don't want to build them, but because the regulations, the technology, and the entire direction of the industry have moved permanently in a different direction. Every V10 that exists today is the only number that will ever exist. That's what separates a used car from a historical artifact. And it's why the owners who understood this early aren't selling, while the ones who didn't are already watching from the sidelines. So here's the real question. If you had to choose just one of these 7 to own before the market fully catches up, which one would it be, and why? Because the next video breaks down a different kind of disappearing engine, one collectors are only just beginning to notice.